Hey, Troy, thanks for joining us today. I want to dive into real estate, and there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Sometimes people say that the market is hot. Sometimes people say that the market is cooling down, or prices are crazy, and people coming from California are messing up our market values. What's the biggest disconnect between what buyers are thinking about the market and what's truly happening? What's the reality of the market? What's going on?
Yeah, I think. Well, thanks for having me first.
Anytime.
This is great. Yeah, I think with that, I don't know if you even really call it a disconnect. I think it's just kind of I don't even know what a good word for it would be. Is just buyers coming in to the market with those higher interest rates are being a lot pickier, ready for that more move-in ready type feel. Because on the backside of that, you also have expensive cost to remodel and upgrades and stuff like that. I mean, everything kind of went up together. So, as far as out-of-state buyers coming in and jacking up the market, I think we're kind of past that. With that, that high-end cash buyer stuff going on during COVID. Now we're seeing a little bit more savvy buyers coming in. If they are coming in, I have not seen personally a whole lot of out-of-town buyers coming into town. I know they're out there because I see them come through my listings. I would say buyers are very cautious on the inspection side of things, really going deep and seeing a lot of that. As far as market goes, we've got low inventory. I think I looked maybe beginning of the week, we were probably at like 170 plus or minus for active listings in town. And that's every realtor is going to give you a different number because we all run them a little bit different. Right. I like to run mine on just simply properties that you can either move into or start working on to remodel or whatever in the next 30 days. Like there's no limited, we're not, just livable type properties that kind of go with that. So, and everybody runs them a little bit different.
Right. So 170 right now.
Give or take, yeah.
Plus all those agents that have properties on the market that they're not listing, which is not totally above board. So there's officially roughly 170.
Yes, that the consumer can see active on the market. There's a process that goes to that listing too. So, we won't get into the whole process of everything, but that can take anywhere from 5 to 15 days. Sometimes if there's background things, we want to get repairs done. Maybe there's probate or anything that we got to wait for, because that can drag you out to 3 months. So there's properties that are coming, but as far as what's available to the consumer active on the market that they can see online and everything is right at 170, give or take.
Got it.
A good balanced market for us would be between 350 and 450 probably.
To balance the demand plus.
Yeah, to kind of give, buyer, not a buyer market, not a seller market, more of a balanced market.
Got it.
So we are a strong seller market. However, the buyers have a little bit of that holding power because they're wanting that, not a perfect property, but a good property.
Right.
They're getting it in whole condition where they don't have to do immediate repairs and all that stuff. So
got it. So the values are also reflective of, the shape and the condition of the property as well.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That goes into it. There's also, supply and demand. And, when you get those properties like that 300 and under market right now, that's a little bit crazy. When something comes on, it's move-in ready and in good condition. There's a lot of buyers looking in that price point. You get to that over 300, 350. There's some movement in there. And then, you get a little bit above that into that 450 market and it's quite a bit slower. In my experience, other agents may say, I've got 5 buyers in that price point.
Right.
But, from what I'm seeing and the movement in the market, that's kind of the case with it. So
for sure. And then there are some agents that are focused on, investment properties and fixer-uppers, and some that are focused on the luxury market. And then there's ones, other agents that work with any buyer that's interested in buying. So where do you fit in that spectrum?
Yeah, I think there are definitely niche, however you say that word, agents, and they find their groove in those certain areas. I would say that I probably cover most of the market. I'm not super picky or choosy, or wouldn't say that I'm a real niche kind of person. Other than residential is kind of my forte. I will delve into the commercial world a little bit, but not without guidance from our commercial agent.
It's a whole other
inside.
animal for sure.
Yeah, it is definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to work with investors. That's all ever evolving, and investors always have a different eyeball for what a good return for them is and what they're going to do with it, actually. So it's always kind of fun to see, where the direction they head. We were talking about the other gentleman earlier is doing that. He's more of a luxury type rental person. He's got extreme detail and care and concern for everything, and everything's just mapped out. Really intriguing to listen to and have a chat with. So
interesting. So there's a place for everyone in this market.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Do you think buyer sentiment as a whole is very optimistic because of the new administration and the way things are going as an economy? Do you think is there a connection between those two pieces?
I don't hear any of that from my clients. I've heard a couple of other realtors from out of town talk about it both ways. It's good or it's bad or it's otherwise. And I actually had this question come up with a seller last fall, right around the election time. In the 12 years I've been in the business, I've not, with the administration changes, I can't say that I honestly see a definite rise or fall in my business because of it. It's really typically buyers that want to buy or have to buy are buying, and sellers that want to sell.
Right.
So it's, I can't say that there wouldn't be some concern, and probably not necessarily with administration type stuff, but more what's going on in the world as a whole. Is it a good time to move? Is it a good time to retire? Is it a good time to downsize? It really comes down to,
right.
Every person there's no cookie cutter.
For sure, because if you're transferred to another city, then you have to look at the real estate aspect of it. Are you going to rent? Are you going to buy? What are the factors? So it's kind of separate from what's happening in Washington D.C. So it can't affect it, I would imagine, certain buyers. But sometimes you just have to buy a house because you need to live someplace.
Right. Exactly.
So and sometimes you need to sell because you want to downsize, or you need to downsize, or there's a variety of reasons why you would sell your property.
Right. Yeah. So it's an ever-changing industry.
I can imagine. So, what makes this market different? Are the different factors for other cities around Casper? Why is Casper, does it have any unique aspects to it?
I think kind of had to do a little soul searching on this a little bit, but I think our sense of community in Casper itself is strong. That's alluring to people. When I moved here in 2006, we were going to take a road trip, go through a few different towns in Wyoming, wanted to make this a destination. And we spent 2 days here, I think, and I never saw a down face or a gloomy attitude. That's rainbows and unicorns, I guess, in a real world. Right. But for those 2 days, I was thoroughly impressed. I liked the way the town was laid out, and overall, genuinely, people were good. When you look at towns like Cheyenne, Colorado towns and stuff like that, we're probably more affordable as far as that destination goes, and we don't have quite the hustle and bustle that is. Right. They're creating or that they have in those communities, which it's not good, bad, or otherwise. But if for the people that are looking for that calmer Wyoming lifestyle, I think Casper's a really good fit for.
For sure. It's calmer, but at the same time, I think I often look at it as like a big town because it's 60, 70,000 people in that range. We're, big enough to see a lot of movement, a lot of, growing industries, bigger, large industries coming in here, a lot of real estate development across, on the east and the west side, and even downtown, there's more real estate investment going on, or real estate development, I should say, new builds happening. So that's different than if you look at a very small town, very rural town in Wyoming. So we do have that, we're still very small, very rural, very, compared to Denver, obviously we're much, much smaller, but there's a lot of activity going on, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. And I come from a town that when I left eastern South Dakota, my hometown was 21,000.
Okay.
So this is big city time. Living for me.
It's a big city living. Yeah. Right. For sure. And I think that's the sweet spot, I think, for anything under 100,000, you have, if you want to work, for example, there are jobs available. There's not a huge unemployment per se in Casper. and things are definitely growing.
Yep.
It could be obviously on a different scale than larger towns, but on a much faster scale compared to small towns of 20,000 people of like Sheridan, for example. So
Exactly.
so it's just proportionate to the size of our town. So there's a lot of positive attributes. I think if you want to live in Wyoming, this is a great place to. We don't have Jackson prices either, so there's that. Thanks for watching today. These podcasts are powered by Payrock, and Payrock is a payment solutions provider. We work with any size business or nonprofit, improving those payment acceptance efficiencies while reducing those overall costs. You can get a hold of me through any one of those social media channels, or you can give me a call. Let's get back to that podcast. So have you seen buyer preferences change over the past, you've been doing this for 10 years now?
Well, we're right at about 12.
12 years. So you've definitely, you're part of the OG crowd of realtors here in town. Have you seen buyer preferences change? Things that buyers want? Has it adapted over the last decade?
I think other realtors would chuckle at the same time, but buyer preferences can pivot from Monday to Tuesday.
So not decade long, just Monday to Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think, I really can't put my finger on one thing that says, buyers are coming in, that all of them are looking specifically for this.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, you're dealing with human beings and our minds change every minute, most of the time, but usually you can get dialed in, but it's really, I can have two buyers in the same price point and we never look at the same houses.
All right.
So it really varies. It just continuously varies, and there's no one set cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm. So the buyer that's looking for a full dining room, for example, and the other buyer that just wants a bar, like a breakfast bar, and it's all they want because they're always out and about. That's not a cultural change or societal change. That's just buyer preference. It's different for everyone.
Yep. And I probably, if there's one thing that I hear more right now than anything, is used to always be open concept. We need open kitchen.
Right.
And now they're, I'm seeing a few more people lean towards, I like that half wall, coming in like partially closed off kitchen.
Right.
But it doesn't, I don't think that it really thwarts anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we pivot.
Right. Of course.
Moment by moment.
Right.
So there's nothing real cookie
I wonder
about it.
I wonder if builders actually change that dynamic. If they build based on what the consumer wants, or they build based on what it's easier for them. I wonder who actually sets, because open floor plans, or open kitchen, the kitchen that sees the family room type thing. That's relatively, it's not a new concept, but it was for a long time. Like everyone wanted that.
Yeah, and a lot of the newer construction is still pretty open.
Mm-hmm.
With those kitchen concepts. Like it's literally one big wide open room
Mm-hmm.
with a kitchen in the corner and the island and all the fun stuff. So that hasn't really changed a lot over the last few years. But I just, mental notes
Right.
from, specific buyers going, I don't really want anything quite that open.
Right.
And I think it's a personality thing.
Oh, for sure. Every family is different. Every person.
Part psychologist.
Right. Exactly. You have to be.
Yep.
I mean, that's sales as well. Sales is you have to understand the psyche of the person that you're talking to and adapt to a certain extent. And
Right.
we'll get into that when we talk about, the value that your brokerage brings and what you bring to this market. But what about Casper? Like the challenges that some of the buyers are facing here in Casper. Are there unique challenges that people face here? Maybe it's just inventory, but are there other challenges that they face?
I think inventory is the number one, because there's not a ton to look at. But also, we went to that event last night and we were talking about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
When you walk up to a table and there's 500 items to choose from,
Mm-hmm.
it gets confusing and overwhelming for the average person.
very good
So kind of the same thing in a market where you might be in that pocket where, let's just say 250 to 300 in a quarter.
Mm-hmm.
There could be a market where we have 60 houses, in a balanced market or even a buyer's market.
Mm-hmm.
That gets overwhelming. And by the end of the day, they tell you the house that they want to put the offer in on, and they put it all together, the one that had this and this and this and this, and you have to stop them and go, that's those three houses over there. And that's not any one of those houses. It's all three of them put together. So, you kind of go back to the drawing board. When you don't have the inventory, it can get frustrating. So when that one nice house does come up and you've got 15 other buyers in there, the fight for that gets kind of crazy.
Absolutely.
And trying to get a showing time. People work, so if they can get away during the day, great. If they got to wait till evening, then you got back-to-back showings at night. You're waiting to get in, and I would say probably just personal lifestyle conflicts would be the bigger pet peeve, I guess, or conflict, if you will,
Right.
That creates that. But that's, I mean, you have the buyers, and you're like, oh, we can only look after 4:45. That's when we set them up.
Right.
And you just contact the other agent and you say, hey, if you get anything, let me know. Usually there's a 24-hour response time on them, but that doesn't always hold true, especially on a hot property.
Right.
So I would say right now, that's probably the bigger problem is just lack of inventory. And when that house does come up, there's other people ready and ready to rip.
Ready, willing, and able.
Yep.
So it's definitely different. In a previous life, I worked in real estate, and in a certain demographic, we'd have 30 or 40 properties available to visit, and it got very time consuming for sure. And our goal in the brokerage was to get, under 10 visits, under 10 visits of 10 different homes. We should find something. And if not, then we're going to go on 20 visits or 30 visits, and then there's no stop to it. But we don't have 40 properties available in a certain demographic here in Casper. I don't think we do.
Yeah, probably not. My very first client, when I got into the business, I was part-time. So we looked at, it was definitely a very different market, but we looked at 42, why I counted is beyond me, but we looked at 42 different houses. We pivoted 3 times on what they were actually looking for, wrote 7 offers, and ended up finally getting something that was okay for them.
Right.
Because we ended up moving them again 3 or 4 years later,
right,
into something they really wanted, but the market was just of that, everything in their price point. There was that many houses to look at, and they wanted to see them all.
Interesting.
And I didn't know any better.
Right. So, you brought up something interesting. They moved again in 3-4 years, but what is the current average that sellers sell their home and they either go up or they downsize?
I think when I first got into the market, it was like 7 years.
Right.
Was a turn. Now I think it's even closer to 10.
Okay.
Either somewhere between 9 and 11. I think on the national average. I don't know in Casper. I don't know where to pull that stat from.
Right, and it's probably very different too because the population size is much different, and there are different. A lot of people will stay here for generations, so it's
right.
It's very unique market for sure. In Denver, there's a lot of turnover, I would imagine.
Yeah, and even the last 5 years created different life perspectives for people, and moving back home, closer to family. Life changes, major life changes that happen that people had to pick up and move on.
Right.
And same thing, vice versa. People coming in.
Right.
Hey, we just want to get closer to family.
Right.
So
interesting. Yeah, there is definitely those seasons in Casper because I forget who mentioned it, but the biggest export we have in Casper is actually our children, and they grow up and they go off to school or they find a job in another city, and so for one reason or other we have to downsize from a 4-bedroom home to a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom home. So and then later in life they come back because they realize there's nothing better than Casper.
Right, exactly.
At least that's our hope. Our hope that they come back.
Yeah, and I think that's a small to mid-sized town thing. I remember when I graduated from high school, everybody, I'm never coming back. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And 5 or 6 years later, here they come.
Right.
And it's never a terrible thing because that's your roots, and and you're comfortable with it, and the people, and the town. So
right, as
creatures of familiarity.
We are, as Dorothy would say, there's no place like home. So
right. Exactly.
So, are there any up and coming developments in Casper that you can talk about? Housing developments that are like, is it? Because I know there's a lot happening on the east side. And even downtown.
Yeah. River West is kind of a desirable area. People aren't flocking. And again, we're a pretty mid-sized town. So whenever everything's kind of combined together, but I would say that's kind of a lucrative area for people. Feels a little bit more open, not so jammed in, and that's not to take anything away from the east side or some of the newer developments and stuff, but, people are spending more time at home. sometimes, and they want that space and, entertaining and stuff like that. So, but then you go to the east side, the newer stuff that's over there. Some of those are bigger, so I don't know that there's necessarily one
It's up and coming.
area. Yeah. I think Casper as a whole is just kind of, I think we are up and coming
Right.
as a community. So I'm just seeing different things. I mean, that event I go back to the event last night because there was probably 400 plus people there.
Right.
A lot of people I've never seen before or met before. So that's new people coming to town, getting involved in the community and stuff, which is awesome. It just continues to support.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there a new development on the west side, River West? Where's
just
that
kind of
at?
that River West area, PV
PV. Okay.
kind of, that there's some half acre, like a little subdivision with a little half acre plus or minus, where they can build the house and the shop.
Right.
There's the newer development. It's kind of, I don't even know how much further they're going to expand on that one, but there's a lot of newer houses in there, some fourplexes and duplexes going in. But again, it's just a feeling of a little bit more space, I think, is what people are kind of after.
Right.
So.
Right. Okay. Going back to the fact there's 170 170 properties on the market, give or take 170, but there's over 300 agents.
Yeah, I think our active licensed agents in town, and I'm probably wrong on this number because I haven't specifically looked for a while.
It's a big number.
Somewhere between 380 and 400.
It's a huge number.
Yeah.
So why is that? Is there a lot of super part-time agents? Because you can't sell 170 homes but one time,
Right.
at least on this current, in
Exactly.
April. So why are there so many? Is it just a lot of part-time people trying to?
Yeah, I don't know a stat on that. I would love to know that stat.
Right.
But I do know, I feel like this is an industry where the 80-20 rule truly comes into effect.
I can imagine.
It's a very high risk, high reward type industry. Right. So you're, the top 20% of realtors typically sell, I would say, give or take 70 to 80% of those properties. And then, but there are a lot of people that do it part-time. I started part-time. This wasn't enough for me to be working all day and then working at night and the whole weekend and all that fun stuff.
Right.
So I decided to make the plunge and go full-time. I don't know. I can't say that it's probably not the breadwinning,
Person in the family. So it gives them an opportunity to get out and see houses and, and do something, but it also creates that freedom of schedule. I think is probably the biggest piece to it. At the same time, when you don't have practice, and because repetition is the mother of learning, is doing things over and over again.
Right.
And this is obviously a layup question for you, but when there's so many 200 plus agents or 300 possibly plus agents that don't do real estate transactions at least half a dozen or a year, then they're not as skilled. They don't remember all the things, and things can fall through the cracks, and it definitely on one hand puts a negative light on the whole industry in itself, and then on the group of agents that are very active, they're struggling to get those buyers because they're not available. So
Right.
it's definitely something that sets certain brokerages apart. So what sets Platinum Properties apart compared to other agents out there?
Yeah. I think as a group, as a whole at Platinum Properties, we really focus on the relationship, strategy, and transparency is a big one. It's just not really stop with the sugar coating, and this is what it is. And
Right.
we're pretty intentional about that. Which, when you can be transparent, they feel like the client feels like they can be transparent. You can create a great strategy moving forward, and everybody's on the same page. It's when the questions aren't asked and there's no lack of transparency that you're wondering, is this it? Is this it? And you build that relationship and that trust. So when they call and say, hey, thinking about this property, have you ever been in it? What do you know about it? You can be honest with them and be, I don't know that this property is for you, but we can certainly go take a look.
Right.
But usually you build that relationship well enough, they trust what you're saying.
Right.
So I think that's a powerful piece. And then when you're talking about the repetition, that keeps you on the cutting edge. We're, as an industry in Wyoming, we just finished up, I'm on the forms committee as well for the state, and we just finished up kind of rebooting the documents. There's a few new ones in there, but there's a different format to it, just like fonts, and it sounds kind of weird, but they are easier to read. Tried to sync them up a little bit more so they're repetitive, in the places where they can be. So there's always that twist. And if you're not, not to, I don't even know what the word would be, not to downplay someone that's only doing 4 to 6 deals a year.
Right.
But if you're not familiar with that contract, that's a major part of our job.
Absolutely.
To be able to translate that contract to our clients and be on the cutting edge, and then negotiations and options and availability and stuff. That's all the stuff that you get repetitions in every day. Every day, if not every day, at least weekly.
For sure. So the knowledge of the market obviously is obviously given to those that know the market, that are working the market, that are closing those deals, that have been inside multiple properties, showing them. I imagine there's cases where you have showed a property 5 or 6 years ago, and then you're reselling it again later down the road. So you know the market, and then the contract as well. So those two things, knowing the contract, knowing the legalities of what's the whole process, is obviously it's much more reliable decision to choose an agent that's been around for a while and that's actually closing deals.
Yeah, and the other thing is obviously more repetition means more problems. So you encounter more problems where we had an issue with one of our agents in the office, not with the agent, but with the deal they were doing. But it was a learning experience for everyone, and an eye opener, and some details, and that's the other thing I would say within our office. We're small enough. We're I don't like to use the word boutique, but we're a smaller office, and we definitely mastermind and spitball all day long. What do you do about this? Have you ever encountered this? Does this look okay? So I mean, there's always that too that makes all of us sharper as we move forward, and that it continues to build more trust with the clients, more trust with each other, and then building that reputation within the industry.
So you've been here for 20 years. You moved here in 2006, is that right? So almost 20 years.
Yep.
And when did you get into real estate?
End of 2013.
13, okay. And did you open up Platinum Properties?
Nope. I worked. I was at a brokerage, and then one of the associate brokers left, started her own, so I went with there. Ended up over at another brokerage in town, which that built my confidence, and that's where I learned the contracts for the most part. The opportunity came with Platinum Properties from a previous owner. It was already established to move in and buy that. We bought that as a partnership, and to kind of, which is super nice because we all share the responsibilities on a day-to-day. So we can kind of still go out and do our sales, and we don't have to worry about competing broker with multiple agents and all that fun stuff. So
right. So when did you open up Platinum Properties?
2021 was when we took over. Yeah.
Got it. But you've been in the market for, selling properties for over 12 years.
I think it'll be 12 years in November this year.
So pushing 12 years, over a decade.
Yep.
So this market.
Right.
So what is yours, or what is Platinum Properties, unique advantage to helping sellers maximize the value of their homes?
I think, honestly, it's the size of our brokerage, and you can do this with a larger brokerage too, but the transparency within the office with our agents. So if you have a property that's not selling, we will, we can go out, walk through it. What do you think about the price? What do you think about the staging? What do you, and you don't have to set up a time for 15 agents to come through and give you that feedback. And we all have extensive years in the business.
Right.
So we all have that experience to back it up and say, and it gives you some clout when you walk into your seller and be like, hey, listen, I think we need to move the couch over here, bring a chair up, and do this and this, open the blinds, and, present better. I'm a guy at the end of the day. I'm not an interior decorator. So it always helps to have some outside perspective. Not that guys can't have that perspective.
Right.
This guy doesn't.
This guy, I get it.
So I know if it looks good, and I know what I like.
Right.
But sometimes it helps to have that outside perspective. So I think that's one of the things that helps with us. And even if we're struggling with a buyer, getting a buyer off the fence, what is it? What's the question I need to ask? Because it's truly about building the relationship and asking questions. It's a process of elimination. So if we haven't breached a certain, question that could open up the door for the proverbial and literal door to their next home.
Right.
But sometimes we get stuck in our own mind and we try to run the clock by ourselves, so to speak. So
right, for sure. So having that experience, you can help coach sellers along to prepare their properties and getting them ready to sell. On the flip side, what about the buyer? Because there's a lot of new things. First-time home buyers, there's a lot to take in, a lot of things to understand about this market, whether it's mortgage rates or even how mortgages actually work and things like that. How does your brokerage, or how do you ensure that they have an experience that they're not caught in the dark about something? Oh, I didn't realize that this is going to happen.
And that's a great question. Actually, we sit down with our clients and go through a buyer consult. So it kind of walks them through the whole process. It's not a 3-hour laborious and with a test at the end kind of thing.
Right.
But just kind of familiarize them with the process. I personally try to, I know just enough about banking to make me dangerous. So I leave it very vague, and we always get into contact with the lender. I do the same thing with title, insurance, all that stuff. I let the pros do their thing in hopes that in return they will let me do my thing, and we can all work together. Because ultimately it's a whole team working together for the common good. And even when we bring the buyer to a deal, we're still on this, we're all trying to get this property closed and under contract and new buyers happy in, old sellers out and on their way, making the right move for everybody. So, but yeah, I think, that buyer consult up front alleviates a lot of questions. And my thing is always, it'll take, 20 to 30 minutes, only longer if you have more questions. And they usually have more questions because, especially if they've never done it before,
right.
Some people have never done it before, but have seen it done with their family or whatever.
Right.
Sometimes you have one that's never done it, one that has done it. And sometimes you have people that, haven't sold for 20 years. So the market's definitely changed, and the way we do things has definitely changed. So it's always care and precaution with your clients. And the more they know and the more educated they are up front, the easier the process is for all parties involved.
And contrary to what people think, that buyer consult and that buyer agreement, the buyer agency, is actually a requirement today. It's not
Yes.
optional or voluntary. It's a requirement.
Correct. Yeah. After the deal back in August, it is required that we do have an agency or an intermediary agreement, something written, relationship put together before we cross the threshold. So,
all right. Do you have a success story in all that? A buyer that you worked with that really feels like they came out on the other side with an experience that they'll never forget?
Man, I hope
they're all like
I
that.
hope they all feel
They're all
like that. Yeah.
That's a good answer.
Probably the one that sticks out. I actually had 2 listings go active at the same time, but they both wanted to buy as well. And of course, that's you've been in the business, so that's a stressful point.
It is.
And so, ironically, 2 different parts of town, 2 completely different types of properties, both looking for completely different properties. And we ended up, they listed the same day, they went under contract within, let's see, how did we do that? We put offers in on properties contingent upon their selling. And both went under contract within 24 hours of each other on their own houses. So it released into the full commitment on the buying property, and then both of those properties closed back to back on the same day. So it was just kind of a weird,
and it worked out.
Double domino effect,
right.
yeah.
And that's clearly not easy to do.
Yeah,
because you can get an offer accepted on a house you want to buy and still not sell your house for weeks, and even days can be stressful.
Yeah. Which creates big anxieties.
Absolutely.
And I'm a firm believer in energies. So if your energy is not positive, we got to figure out how to change it.
Right, for sure.
Because that's, I mean, I actually have a property right now that we did that on. You know, long story short on it, there's some background stuff with it, but there was anxieties. You know, like I got to get this sold, and we weren't getting any showings, and we were marketing and we were pushing it out there, and it was just in that weird price point. And, you know, and all of a sudden we're going to pivot and we're going to do this and this and this and this. And we got it all scheduled. And literally within an hour, we got 3 scheduled showings and 1 offer.
Right.
So just the energy, you know, that seller was, the energy levels came down. We're like, okay, so we're going to do this. This is what's going to help.
Right.
And all of a sudden the door opened, and
that's cool.
So just kind of an affirmation that the energy of the buyer and the seller, if they stay positive, will find what you need,
right,
and find the buyer for your property.
Because ideally, if you're selling a property, it's ideally you should buy the new property first and then sell your old property, but that rarely happens.
Yeah, and a lot of times, you know, we have contingencies for that, you know, but fortunately, I think most of the time it works out. Every once in a while, you know, another offer comes in on that other property, and we got to kind of realign and reboot, and we've taken houses off the market. Because of it. But, you know, ultimately we end up coming back on the market. Everything all works out. But knock on wood. We've not left anyone homeless.
That's good.
You know, so
what makes, before we get into your entrepreneurial journey, because people don't realize that you actually have to be, as a real estate agent, you're in business for yourself. You're your own entity, your own business. But in one word, how would you describe Troy Mack Real Estate? Why should buyers or sellers contact Troy Mack?
Man, you didn't give me that question.
I didn't know, but I think you know the answer.
Yeah, I think probably 2 words: care and concern. You know, my journey in real estate is reflective upon or from my journey buying and selling real estate before I was in real estate.
Right.
And I've had really great agents, and I've had really poor, exploitatory with that. So when I did decide to get into the business and in this industry, I made it a point to, you know, I wanted to work by referral. And how do you work by referral? You have to have a good reputation. You have to be solid. You have to be, you know, hustling and do it, you know, but not without care and concern. Yeah. So I guess so I went 2 words on it, not 1.
It's all good. So when did you know in your entrepreneurial journey that you were made for, or that you wanted to, you know, go into business for yourself?
It was kind of twofold. When I was doing it part-time, I had that first sale, and it literally felt awesome when we were done. 42 houses, 7 bad offers. We finally got one, put together. It was like nothing that I've ever experienced. I wasn't punching the clock. I was on, but then when I was in the oil field industry at the time. So that started kind of taking a tinker, and I decided I'm going to go do this, full bore, 100%, no bartending job, no liquor store back up, just 100% this. And my other circumstances going on at the time created a serious financial hardship, but every day I would just get up and go and go and go. I think I found grit and fortitude that I didn't know I had, and kind of pushed through and like I kind of had a real, not a breakthrough, but a breaking point, where I really, like, walking out of the house one day, it was like, why am I even trying this? Like, I can go here and work. I can go anywhere and work. Yeah. And, but I pushed through, went out, did my grind that day. And like the next day, everything changed. Right. So I think it's just, it's kind of proverbial motivational speaker stuff. You know, when you think you can't push any harder, if you just push just a little bit harder, it's just on the other side. Absolutely. And that's kind of what happened with me. So it's true that desperation brings out a lot of good in people, and we don't realize that. We want to avoid being desperate. We want our life to be nice and like a long, river, like the Platte River, nice and calm and quiet. Right. But the reality is, life is not like that. But those defining moments are usually out of desperation. Yeah, I actually even had Tony Robbins said it, and I don't know who really said it.
Yeah.
But it was, if you want to take the island, you got to burn the ships. And that's what I did.
You burned them all.
I burned them all. There's a lot of days I was standing on the shore looking for them, but
what, so 10 years into this, almost 12 years into this, what's one thing that you wish you would have known 12 years ago in running your own business?
I don't know. It's a tough question because everything that I had to gut and push through, you know, compressed and made the diamond, so to speak. And I don't know that I would give up any of that. I mean, there were definitely days and moments. I'm like, I wish I could redo that.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But sure. I think that just life in general, I mean, I can't look back and regret that I didn't know anything or, because, and also our technology changes so much from day to day and week to week that I can't, I mean, I'm just glad I never had to physically put an offer in an envelope and drive it across town to hand deliver it like they used to have to do.
Yep.
And that's even changing from what we have been doing to what's going to be happening in the future, I think, as well. So
I used to do that. And that's how I did real estate. I'd drive it to the other brokerage.
Yep.
And then dropped it off.
And that's what you did,
Yeah.
And you didn't have cell phones and you didn't, I mean, our life is so fast paced and moving. And so you can, it's nice to be able to do it on the go. But yeah, I don't know that there's any one thing that when I look back on it that I wish I would have known sooner, because I think I learned it in the right timing,
right,
in the right place. So
the hard way, as they say, the dark days definitely.
I kind of thrive on the school of hard knocks, apparently.
So in this incredibly competitive market as a business owner, what keeps you pushing forward?
Yeah, I love the industry. Love the people we work with, both clients and other realtors, because I do feel like we do need to maintain those relationships strongly with other realtors in town. I had an older commercial agent tell me when I first got in the business to embrace the industry as a lifestyle and not a career and not a job. That goes a long ways because I think what I love about it and what keeps me going about it is because I can live my life and do business at the same time. There's definitely, I think if you talk to my other half, she would say too much real estate, talk about it all the time, but it's part of my life, and it's, so I think that's probably what drives it is there's real estate in every corner of life.
Oh, for sure.
At one level or another. And sometimes you just want to break away from it all and go golf or go sit at the mountain,
right.
But that's also an opportunity that this industry creates, that you can step away for, a couple hours, a couple days and kind of get recharged and then come back at it again. So
one of the things I know that you do in your free time, which you don't have a lot because you live and breathe real estate, is something called BNI.
Yep.
And I want to get into that. Some people don't know what BNI is, but I'd like to hear first an explanation before we get into, why you do BNI and what your vision is for BNI, because you're the president of one of the two chapters here in town. Full disclosure, I'm the other president of the other chapter. But what is BNI? First of all, what is BNI? What does it do? It's not in your questions.
Okay. Yeah. So it's Business Networking International. We actually just had this conversation the other day in one of our meetings. The value and what it is it's a networking. It's a group of local business owners that come together weekly and meet up. We get to present. Hopefully, ideally, it's a specific ask, for the week, and then we talk about referrals and testimonials at the end. But more importantly, that presentation, you get 60 seconds every week and then a 10-minute presentation every couple months. But in that 60-second presentation, if you're speaking to 10 people in that room and they all have a data, I've determined, not maybe we, but I've determined that the average business person probably has somewhere between 100 and 200 active database people that they connect with on a regular basis. So if you say 150, and I stand up and I pitch a property because that's what I do. I'll have a new listing, so I specifically pitch that property that week. And But when I pitch that, I'm not just pitching to 10 people in the room.
Right.
I'm pitching to them and their database. So that's theoretically 1,500 people hear my pitch.
Right.
Because that business person that's sitting in there understands network marketing, and they go right into their Rolodex in the back of their head and think of everybody that was asking about property, or clients they have that are looking for properties,
right,
to see if that's a fit, you know. And then, you know, just the networking itself, I discovered about 2 years into it, because I did it for 4 years, and then I broke away for a while and then ended up back. But I think it took me 2 years before I read one of Ivan Meisner's books, Networking Like a Pro, till I really realized that what we were doing on a weekly basis was actually network marketing. And what most people think network marketing is meeting, like last night was a networking event, but not everybody networks like a true network marketing works. So it's definitely more ingrained. It's more intentional,
right?
To, instead of, you know, I'll use Chamber of Commerce, Business After Hours as a fine example, because they did put it in the book. Most of us go to business after hours, and when we come home at night, we've got a pocket full of business cards.
Right.
Look at all these people. What do you do with that? Do you call them all? Do you set appointments with all of them? Or do you go in and take specific notes and say, oh, those 3 people I'd like to have a coffee appointment with. I think I might have some business for them. I want to find out more what they're doing. And you have that one-to-one with them, and you learn about their business. And that's what true network marketing is.
Right.
Where you can get into, because ideally you want to build that relationship so they have access to your database. I have access to your database, not in the physical sense, but anytime I have an ask, you know, and then pretty soon it's, I got a guy or I got a gal, and let me give them a call or send them your number.
Exactly.
So
it's a great way to look at it. I think that the word network marketing or networking has changed a little bit, and it's unfortunate. I think that a lot of it, you know, when we think of the word network marketing, it's always online or it's impersonal. But I think the definition that BNI uses is the authentic one. It's basically relational. It's building your network. It's building your relationships. It's building that relational equity with colleagues and people that you know or that you're going to meet. Because a really good book that was written was about seven degrees of separation. We're only 7 people away from that one contract that could change our lives, or 7 people away from, you know, making that connection for us to get that business that we're looking for. And that's what BNI is expanding that relational market and developing that relational equity you have with the people around you. So I think it's a great tool.
Yeah. And it also kind of makes you more of a connector.
Yeah.
So when you are somewhere, you know, it might not even be business related, but, you know, somebody at BNI mentioned they have this. You're like, oh man, they got one of those. I mean, we talked about it yesterday with internet services, because that's a hot topic the last couple of days. But having one conversation with one person led me to another person who led me to the pro at setting this up and knows all the ins and outs.
Right.
Well, I can just cut to the chase, get the cliff notes. You can teach me all the stuff that you've experienced and push through. So it doesn't necessarily always funnel back into business. That's the idea behind it. But the personal life stuff too, the little, you know, the things you need or questioning. You know, I'm a big fan of cliff notes. That's how I got through high school. But yeah, I mean, if you know something, why would I want to go research it for 3 hours when you've already been doing it and you know how to do it? So, you know, and that's the other power of BNI. You get into BNI, you start watching how it works. It's a fast track to actual network marketing.
Absolutely. And what I think often about is when I go into client meetings, I don't always go alone. In my mind, I'm thinking about, you know, if real estate comes up, then I know a person. If you know, like you said, IT services comes up, I always go into these meetings thinking that, you know, my service or my solution is not possibly everything that this client needs, and he might need something else. So my ears are open to, you know, and I go in, you know, proverbially walking to that meeting with other people in mind, you know, different people in my BNI chapter or in your chapter as well. I think about, you know, cleaning services. We don't have a cleaning professional in our chapter, but you do have one in your chapter. So there's things like that you're you're not relying on your own skill set and your own abilities. You're not walking into that client meeting with just by yourself. And I think that brings a lot of value, added value to what you're actually trying to accomplish in that client meeting, I think.
Right.
So.
Yep, for sure. And, using real estate as an example, I don't know just about real estate, but if you need a HVAC contractor, an electrical contractor, I mean, we all have that background behind that. And so that's kind of where the connector piece, and that true network marketing, I mean, it doesn't have to be someone that's actually in the group. But if we know somebody or another industry, I mean, I still get calls from clients 7 years ago, like, who do we use for our inspection for our HVAC again?
Right.
Let me look.
Yeah.
We can look, or I can just be like, oh, use this, and that's who they call. So it's so much deeper than even just the meeting. Because we all have that outside access as well.
So I think we've maybe asked this, or you've already answered this question, but what's your vision for growth and impact of BNI here in Casper?
Obviously we'd like to see the chapters grow, because more butts in the seat proverbially, means a bigger crowd for you to pitch your business to, which also, let's face it, at the end of the day, it's all about trying to earn some more money and make some more money. But when you can do that on a referral basis, and you can bring warm leads into your database and nurture them and build those relationships, that's a way better way to work than, we just talked about referrals yesterday in our group. And, would you rather have a list of 50 names to call, or 3 solid leads from someone that you know and trust, and that they know and trust, and they're bringing them to you? That's definitely more enjoyable for everybody, more comfortable as well. So
how do you encourage collaboration and trust? Because you need that. When I refer a real estate, lead to you, a person that's looking to buy, then obviously I have to trust that you're going to treat that person well. Because then if you don't, then I look bad as well. So how do you develop that?
So that kind of goes back to the one-to-one that I talked about when you're collecting those cards at the business after hours. You're building that relationship the first time. Tell me about your business. Tell me more about what you do. And and it could take 45 minutes. It could take 2 hours by the time you get done with that whole session. But you learn something about both of each other. The next time you do that one-to-one, it might be more of a personal thing. Man, I'm just not in it today. I got this stuff going on. And I've seen some really tight friendships build between people that you would have never put together in a room before that, that they know everything about everything in their family. So it's really, truly building those relationships, because who better to trust than someone that you've shared your personal life and experiences and what you're going through in life with. That's the person that you're going to refer, and you keep them top of mind, because, we all know that warm fuzzy, or that tough time that everybody goes through together, that's what bonds you. And, it really comes down to relationships at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So when does your chapter meet?
We meet on Thursdays from 11 to 1:30.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, that's a long meeting. 11:30 to 1.
Got it.
And we meet at Rocca's.
Got it. So if there are business owners that listen to this podcast, and if they're interested in joining your BNI chapter, how would they reach you?
Cell phone, email.
Anything.
My stuff is all out there as a real estate agent. So, but yeah, I can take a phone call, we want to get you signed up as a visitor, so you can kind of come see it, kind of coach you through what's going to happen. And then we run through the meeting, and you're free to ask any questions on how anything works. Stick around afterwards. Really we kind of, yesterday we changed, we have specific industries that we're looking for all the time. That's hard to come up with a new list every week. So what we're really looking for is entrepreneurs, new business startups that are kind of stale. And I put hot and confused on the list, which was a trigger point for everybody because they didn't understand what that was. And that would be someone that is like just grinding away and hustling, doesn't take the time to look up. They just go. But they feel like they're spinning their tires. This can be a really good opportunity for someone like that to come in and get cooled down a little bit and a little bit more categorically set, and to learn how to work by referral.
Right.
Because there's nothing worse than sitting on the phone for 3 hours trying to cold call and build, sometimes you can be in your own way for that. But when you can come in and actually pitch and explain to people, the crazy part is I think a lot of people actually learn what they do in BNI because they have to stand up and talk about it. And you give them a 10-minute presentation and they ask you to bump it a couple of weeks because they got to come up with something.
Mm-hmm.
It's always kind of interesting because by the time they're done, it's almost like in teaching us what they do, they actually learned what they do.
Right.
We all know what we do, but like, do you really know what you do and how you work? And by the time they're done with that, you see people, new members of the chapter, change and pivot a little bit because all of a sudden they get it.
Right.
Like, this is what I do. This is why I do it. And I just think it's really powerful.
A lot of people say that they the biggest lesson they learn is about themselves. Truly understand the why behind why they do what they do, but also what they do in the intricacies. Because we all have our, talking points of I sell houses, I sell property, or in my case, I help businesses reduce costs on payment processing, for example. But when you get into the nitty gritty, you can talk about it in hundreds of different ways, and it allows you to fully understand your business even better. So it's a lot of personal growth is one of the biggest things that people take out of or get out of BNI.
I've had some real banger ideas that pop up when I'm working on my presentation. I'm like, why haven't I been doing this before?
Absolutely. No, I hear you. So, Troy, well, thank you for this time, for this podcast. Thank you very much for your time. So you said your stuff is out there. If they're looking to get into to buy or sell a property, they can find Troy Mack Properties out there? So
it'd be Troy Mack Real Estate, Troy Mack, Platinum Properties of Casper. That would be the easiest way.
I think you told me that if it's their first time home buyer, you're actually going to buy their first house. Is that right?
No. I will guide you through the process.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right.